In ecology, a population consists of all the organisms of a particular species living in a given area. Ecologists study how organisms interact with the environment. Population ecology is more specialized field of study of how and why the population of those organisms change over time. Population ecology deals with the study of the processes that affect the distribution and abundance of plant and animal populations. A population is a subset of individuals of one species that occupies a particular geographical area. The geographical boundaries of a population are easily established for some species, but it is more difficult for others. Population ecology is characterized by various factors like density, size, dispersal, growth, life history strategies, as well as age-related factors. An organism's life history is the sequence of events related to the survival and reproduction that occur from birth to death. Populations form the different parts of the geographical range that a species inhabits may exhibit marked variations in their life histories. These variations include breeding frequency, the age at which the reproduction begins, the number of times an individual reproduces during lifetime, the number of the offspring produced at each reproductive episode, as well as the ratio of the male to female offspring produced, and whether the reproduction is sexual or asexual. These differences in life history characteristics can have a profound effect on the reproductive success of an individual and the dynamics, ecology, and evolution of population. Population size represents the total number of individuals present in a habitat. Larger populations may have more stable than the smaller populations. Large populations are likely to have greater genetic variability and thus more potential to adapt to the changes in the environment through natural selection. Population density refers to how many individuals reside in per unit area or volume. A member of low density population where organisms are sparsely spread out might have more trouble finding a mate to reproduce when compared to the individual in a high density population. The populations are affected by four main factors, and they are natality, mortality, emigration, and emigration. Natality is the increase to the population size through reproduction, that is the births, and immigration, it increases into the population size from external population. The mortality, it is a decreases the population size due to the death, and emigration, this also decreases the population size due to the loss due to external populations. And this is the formula which is used to measure the population growth. And here N stands for the natality, I for emigration, M for mortality, and E for emigration. Species distribution or dispersal. There are three main types. One is uniform dispersion, random, and clumped. Here also this is random, uniform, and clumped. In uniform dispersion, the individuals of a population are spaced evenly. In random dispersion, individuals are distributed randomly without a predictable pattern. Whereas in the clumped type, the individuals are clustered in groups. Population growth. So when the resources are unlimited, the populations exhibit exponential growth. As you can see here, you will get a J-shaped curve. So this is population size against the time. When the resources are limited, the populations exhibit a logistic growth. In logistic growth, the population expansion decreases as the resources become scarce, and it levels off when the carrying capacity of the environment is reached. And logistic growth, here we will get a S-shaped curve. Logistic growth. So the example is yeast, a microscopic fungus which exhibits the classical S-shaped curve when grown in a test tube. Its growth levels off as the population depletes the nutrients that are necessary for the growth. In the real world, with limited resources, the exponential growth cannot continue indefinitely. Exponential growth may occur in environments where few individuals and plentiful resources are there. When the number of individuals get large enough, the resources will be depleted and growth rate will slow down. Eventually, the growth rate will level off. Now, what do you mean by a carrying capacity? The maximum population size that a particular environment can sustain is called carrying capacity. In real, the populations, a growing population often overshoots its carrying capacity, and the death rate increases beyond the birth rate, causing the population size to decline back to the carrying capacity or below it. Most populations usually fluctuate around the carrying capacity in an undulating fashion. The population dynamics and regulation. The carrying capacity varies annually. For example, some summers are hot and dry, whereas others are cold and wet in many areas. The carrying capacity during the winter is much lower than its during summer. So naturally, the events such as earthquakes, volcanoes and fires alters the environment and carrying capacity also. The populations do not usually exist in isolation. They share the environment with other species competing with them for some resources. These factors also important to understand how the population will grow. Density dependent growth regulation. The density dependent factors also includes predation, inter and intraspecific competition and parasites. Usually, the denser a population is, the greater its mortality rate. During intra and intraspecific competition, the reproductive rates of the species will usually be lower, reducing their population rate of growth. In addition, low prey density increases the mortality of its predator because it has more difficulty in locating its food source. When the population is denser, the diseases spread more rapidly among the members of the population, which affects the mortality rate. Now, the density independent regulation. Many factors that are typically physical in nature cause mortality of population regardless of its density. The factors like weather, natural disaster, pollution, etc. For example, an individual deer will be killed in a forest fire regardless of how many deer happen to be in that area. Its chances of survival are the same whether the population density is high or low. We can define the life history of a species as its life cycle, and in particular the life cycle features related to survival and reproduction. The life history is shaped by natural selection, and it reflects how the members of a species distribute their limited resources among growth, survival, and reproduction. In ecology or case selection theory, it is related to the natural selection of combination of traits in an organism that trade off between quantity and quality of the offsprings. The concepts of quantity and quality offsprings are sometimes referred to as cheap or expensive based on the expandable nature of the offsprings and parental commitments made. The stability of the environment can predict if many expandable offsprings are made or if fewer offsprings of higher quality would lead to higher reproductive success. An unstable environment would encourage the parent to make many offsprings because the likelihood of all the majority of them surviving to adulthood is slim. In contrast, more stable environments allow the parents confidently to invest in one offspring because they are more likely to survive to adulthood. Now, what are R-selected species? The organisms whose life history is subjected to R selection are often referred to as R strategist or R selected. R selected species show high growth rate, small body size, early maturity, onset, short generation time, and the ability to disperse offspring widely. They produce many offsprings, each of which has a relatively low probability of surviving to adulthood. A typical example of R species is Dandelion genus. Similarly, bacteria, diatoms, insects, grasses, cephalopods, and rodents. Here, a little litter of the mice with their mother. The reproduction of the mice follows an R selection strategy with many offsprings, short gestation, less parental care, and short time until sexual maturity is reached. Now, case selected species. Organisms whose life history is subject to case selection are often referred to as case strategists or case selected. They have living densities close to the carrying capacity and typically are strong competitors for limited resources. Large body size and produce few offsprings, each of which has relatively high probability of surviving to adulthood. The examples are elephants, whales, eagles, etc. And here is an example of bald eagle, an individual of a typical case strategist species. Now the difference between the R selected and K selected species. So this is the tabular information. Habitat: with respect to the R selected species, they live in variable unstable habitats, that is the environment with non-predictable conditions, whereas K selected species, they live in stable environment with predictable conditions. Then size: the species tend to be small in size and therefore requires a small habitat to live. Here the species tend to be larger in size and therefore requires a large habitat to live in. With respect to sexual maturity, the species here reach the sexual maturity early in the life. Here the species reach the sexual maturity later in the life. With respect to the life expectancy, the R selected species generally have a short life expectancy when compared to the K selected species. The population is not regulated by the density, whereas here the population stabilizes or nearing the carrying capacity. Reproduction: or selected species undergo rapid reproduction to stabilize themselves, whereas here the K organisms are high in population and do not need to undergo rapid reproduction. The number of reproductions: the R selected organisms reproduce only a single time during their lifespan and requires less energy to procreate. The K selected organisms reproduce many times during their lifespan and require more energy to procreate. The number of offsprings: the species produce many offsprings but only few live out their full lifespan. The species have few offsprings that have long life expectancy. With respect to the competitive ability, the R selected species have poor competitive ability when compared to the K selected species. Extinction: or selected species, they are less prone to extinction because they mature early in the life and have a large number of offsprings. Whereas K selected species, the organisms are more prone to extinction than R selected species because they mature later in the life and have fewer offsprings with longer gestation period. With respect to the predation, they are easily subjected to predation when compared to the K selected species. And mortality, the R selected species have high mortality rate when compared to the K selected species. And lastly, population growth curve. The R selected species tend to have a J-shaped curve, population growth curve, whereas K selected species usually tend to have S-shaped population growth curve. Then what about life tables, survivorship curves, as well as age sex related structure? To predict if a population will grow or shrink, ecologists need to know the birth and the death rates for organisms at different ages as well as the current age and sex makeup of the population. The life tables summarizes the birth and the death rate for the organisms at different stages of their lives. The survivorship curves are the graphs that show what fraction of a population survives from one age to the next. And an age sex pyramid is a snapshot of a population in time showing how its members are distributed among age and sex categories. Life tables. Life tables are the tables of the data on survivorship and fecundity of individuals within a population. Life tables are constructed in this way are called cohort life tables. So the life table of a hypothetical organism, which consists of age, survival rate, survivorship and fecundity related data. They can be used to determine the age or stage specific fecundity and mortality rate, as well as survivorship and basic reproductive rates. Understanding these demographic processes and how they affect the population is the central concern of the population and conservation biologists. Survivorship curves are the graphs that show what fraction of population survives from one age to the other. And altogether there are three types of survivorship curves, and they are type 1, for example human beings, type 2 represented by birds, and type 3 tree as an example. In type 1 curve, organisms tend not to die when they are young or middle aged, but instead die when they become elderly. The species have small numbers of offspring and provide lot of parental care to make sure those offspring survive. In type 2, organisms die more or less equally at each age interval. Organisms may also have relatively few offsprings and provide significant parental care. In type 3 curve, very few organisms survive their younger years. Species with this type of curve usually have lot of offspring at once, such as tree releasing thousands of seeds, but do not provide much care for their offsprings. The age-sex pyramid is a snapshot of a population in time showing how its members are distributed among age and sex categories. Populations have individuals of different ages. The proportions of the individuals in each age group form the age structure. In a evergreen forest, for example, has a trees of different age groups of a particular species. The information about the age-sex structure of a population is often shown as the population pyramid. In this diagram, on the x-axis shown is the percent of the population in each category, with the males to the right and females to the left. And y-axis shows the age group starting from birth to old age. So here the births add individuals only to the base of the pyramid. The deaths remove the individuals from the population at all ages after birth. Here are the different stages of population pyramids. Stage 1 expanding, stage 2 again expanding, stage 3 stationary, and fourth one contracting. The first one, high birth rate, rapid fall in each upward age group due to high death rate and short life expectancy. Here, high birth rate, fall in the death rate as more living in the middle age, slightly longer life expectancy. In the third one, declining birth rate, low death rate, more people are living to old age. In the fourth one, low birth rate, low death rate, higher dependency ratio, longer life expectancy. So the large fractions of young and reproductive individuals mean a population is likely to grow. Large fractions of individuals past reproductive age mean a population is likely to shrink. Now the concept of metapopulation. The metapopulation, it was first, the word was introduced by Richard Levins in 1969. The metapopulation is a population in which individuals are spatially distributed in a habitat in two or more subpopulations. Each local habitat in a metapopulation is referred to as a subpopulation. Human activities and natural disasters are the main causes of metapopulation. Such factors cause the fragmentation of a large habitat into smaller patches. To summarize, the population ecology and dynamics of all species is a complex result of their genetic structure. The life histories of the individuals, fluctuations in the carrying capacity of the environment, the relative influence of all different kinds of density dependent and density independent factors that limit the population growth, the spatial distribution of individuals, and the pattern of movement between the populations that determine the metapopulation structure. It is therefore not surprising that there are often great fluctuations in the number of individuals in local populations, and that our long-term persistence of the species may often require the conservation of many rather than few populations. Thank you.